What is up, everybody? We are back with another WNBA update. She's Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton. On today's edition of the program, we are talking WNBA Rivalry Week. We are talking the Los Angeles Sparks. Don't look now, but are they a team to watch? And we are talking Liberty, Lynx, and the back and forth matchups that we are getting between two of the best teams in the league. So let's dive into it. And before we tip off the first quarter of today's show, we start how we always do with our Fast Five, the 5 storylines that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA. Let's get into it. Number 1, it's the WNBA's first ever rivalry week. This is the first time ever that they have scheduled what they are calling a rivalry week, and that all started this past Saturday night with the Indiana Fever Chicago Sky matchup, which is an obvious Caitlin Clark Angel Reese rivalry that started back in college that they're continuing in the W. We also had the Dream Mercury on Sunday, and this week we will see Liberty Sparks Dream Storm, which is in Canada, which is awesome now that we're setting the table for the Toronto Tempo to come into the league, and a few other key matchups over the next couple of days. So do we like that the WNBA is doing this with Rivalry Week? How do we think that it could be better for Rivalry Week? We will get into much more of that later on in the podcast, but let's move on to number 2. Napheesa Collier has missed 3 games after spraining her right ankle on Sunday night against the Las Vegas Aces. Now, the Lynx still remain comfortably at the top of the league standings in first place, and they've won their last 5 games, 2 of which included beating the New York Liberty without Napheesa Collier in a WNBA Finals rematch from last season. The latest update is that Collier hopes to return to the court within the next week. That's the latest that we've heard. We'll keep you updated, but for now, it's wait and see on the MVC. Number 3, Phoenix Mercury's Alyssa Thomas makes history with her 3rd triple-double in a row. She had 18 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists. She became the first ever WNBA player with 3 straight triple-doubles in their win over the Fever on Thursday night. This is her 19th career triple-double. Now, mind you, no other WNBA player in history has had more than 4, and she's had 19. Just let that sink in. Huge accomplishment. Big creds to Alyssa Thomas, who does not get enough love for the things that she's been doing throughout her entirety of a career and this season as well. Let's move on to number 4. Vital Indiana Fever point guards Sydney Colson and Aari McDonald, who have done so much in picking up the pieces in Caitlin Clark's injury absence, suffer season-ending injuries of their own. They lost to the Phoenix Mercury on Thursday night. That's when they both left with injuries. Sydney Colson tore her left ACL, and McDonald broke a bone in her right foot. So this now leaves the Indiana Fever with a big ol' 0 goose egg healthy point guards as we go into such a critical point in the regular season. That brings us to the last, but certainly not least, number 5. A'ja Wilson makes WNBA history. She became the first ever player with 30 points and 20 rebounds in a single game. She put up 32 in the Aces routing of Connecticut and also added 20 boards just for fun. The Aces are now on a 4-game winning streak, and they sit at number 6 in the standings. But if A'ja keeps playing like this, could the Aces make a push as we head into the end of the season? That was this week's Fast 5, everything that you may have missed in the WNBA, but let's get into it. We will start with game time, our first quarter, first ever WNBA Rivalry Week. We have Liberty in Minnesota. We had the Sky and the Fever, which is, a fun take on the WNBA, embracing some of these college rivalries cast. But yeah, I'm very plugged in to the league. Obviously, we talk about the league every single week. I love the WNBA. I follow every possible social media account there is. Not a whole lot of buzz for Rivalry Week. So, in my opinion, really fun idea. I love embracing rivalries. Not the best execution.
Yeah, they first announced it in a press release, I think announcing the schedule maybe, or announcing just kind of like big picture ideas for the season. And it was kind of buried a little bit in there. I put it in the newser at the time, also forgot about it, haven't thought about it since. I'm on board with you. I love the idea of rivalry weeks, talking to Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and people in kind of leadership roles in the W. This is what they've been talking about. This is how you grow the league, how you grow interest. These are games of consequence in August. You love to see it. I just don't think it was executed very well, because a big reason I think we haven't heard about the rivalry week is because we've talked so much, for example, about how New York and Minnesota play their 3 of 4 games within like 10 days of each other on like these really wacky scheduling issues, which doesn't really lend to fun rivalry games. And you had already mentioned like Sky Fever is a rivalry. It's a historic rivalry. It also has that college aspect to it with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Neither one of them played on Saturday.
And that's where injuries, obviously, it's the obvious thing that's going to show up is when you have injuries like to Caitlin Clark and to Angel Reese. Obviously, that hurts those respective teams. That hurts the intrigue to the games, but also hurts that the really foundation of that rivalry, at least what has come to surface over the last couple of years between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, just doesn't exist anymore. But in my opinion, that's now the responsibility of the WNBA, because there are probably a lot of new WNBA fans that don't realize how deep and how historical that Fever Sky rivalry is. Educate the new fans, educate the new people that are now paying attention to this league. And I don't feel like we've gotten that. And I think that Fever Sky and this Caitlin Clark Angel Reese rivalry it's a big one, right? We talked about it ever since LSU won the national championship, and Angel Reese was pointing to her ring finger after the national championship, and it was the #1 topic of conversation on ESPN, on Yahoo Sports, and every national news media outlet. But what else? Like, what other rivalries have organically unfolded? Because I think the last thing that we want to see is trying to see the league like force a rivalry that's not there, that I think fans can feel that. Fans can feel how it's a little bit forced and inorganic. But there are so many rivalries that exist in this league that may not be as publicized or as obvious as Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese and the Fever team and the Sky team. So I would love for the league to take that next step forward of marketing its players, not just marketing the league itself, not just marketing the growth of the league, which is wonderful and very well reported, rightfully so. I want to see more of this, and Rivalry Week is a good idea, but dig a little bit deeper, pull the layers back a little bit.
It feels so just slammed in. I'm old school, so let me bring over my notebook because I went down Rivalry Week.
You and me both, Cass.
Yes.
Nothing like a good pen and paper.
Oh, I like it so much better. So let's go down where I wrote Rivalry Week. New York has 3 rivalry opponents on the schedule. You have Los Angeles, which is kind of like the cross-country rivalry. I can get into that, right? LA versus New York. People talk about it all the time.
Totally.
New York and Las Vegas, obviously, like short memory here. Don't have a short memory. That was an incredible final series a couple of years ago, and then the semifinals last year. And then you have New York, Minnesota, which I don't know if I would call that a rivalry. I think there has to be like some sort of intense history here. And this is very recent, but also like they've called it a rivalry already, kind of. Like I think Courtney Williams said it. But that's not my point. My point is New York is playing 3 rivalry games in the span of like, 9 days or something? That's absurd. Just like pick some. Like not every rivalry that you feel strongly about has to be in this week, because I think it's hurting the product. And if it's hurting the product, do I really want to watch?
And that's why, like, look, I have no problem that we're getting New York, Minnesota. None at all.
Oh, no.
I have an issue with the fact that we had to wait until July 30th to get the first matchup between these two. But when you have something good, you don't need to cram it all within this one little span and try and market it as something with a bunch of all of these other games. You know, like, let it breathe a little bit. Let the games market themselves and have it in its own standalone window, and then do the marketing for maybe some of these games that aren't as obvious on paper as being really, really good and heated matchups, especially coming off of the WNBA finals this past season. So I love the idea. I want to see more of it. I'm so glad that the W is embracing a lot of these rivalries. Rivalries are good for sports. They're good for women's sports. They're good for sports in general. And they are so fun and organic, and they happen naturally in this league. And I am so on board for celebrating that. But let's celebrate it. Let's truly allow these games to be kind of standalone and celebrated in and of themselves.
Yeah, could not agree more. So I think like ending kind of capstone here, this is a great idea. I love that the WNBA is finally leaning into things like this.
Yeah.
But I think like many things, you know, it needs to continue to evolve and get better in the ensuing years to really be what they want it to be.
No doubt. We live and we learn. That we'll put that one in the little suggestion box of the WNBA office. I'm sure they appreciate our feedback. Let's go on to the second quarter. We just mentioned it. Liberty Lynx, a rematch of this past year's WNBA finals. It was chippy. It was back and forth. It was close. And we have gotten several of these matchups over the last couple of weeks. But the Lynx are up. They've got the advantage 2-0 now that we are 2 games into this 4-game, essentially, series between these two teams. Now, the Lynx were able to take down the Liberty with no Napheesa Collier. Important to point out also that the Liberty were without Breanna Stewart. But the Lynx being able to take down a stacked Liberty team without their, likely MVP of the league, without their key cog and the motor that keeps everything running. Because after the Lynx took that first game, one of my big questions was, is the difference between the Lynx and the Liberty just that the Lynx have Napheesa Collier and the Liberty don't? Like, I could be as simple as that, but they didn't have Napheesa Collier to fall back on in that second matchup, and they were still able to take that game. What have you noticed from this Lynx squad and how they've been able to pick up the pieces without Napheesa Collier?
I do want to come back to the New York of it all, but when it comes to the Lynx playing without Fee, they have always, for 2 years now, talked about their chemistry. And I think that really does matter in a moment like this. It can even be extrapolated out to DiJonai Carrington, which I know you want to talk about soon here too. But DiJonai was in that backcourt with Natisha Hiedeman and Courtney Williams when they played in Connecticut and they made it to the finals. And that was a team, I don't know if it was that specific team, but it was the era of like the underdog. Like everyone overlooks Connecticut because they didn't have necessarily a star like Fee, even though they had Alyssa Thomas, they did not have this like marketing star, MVP caliber player like Fee. They were all just quote unquote role players. So I think everyone's stepping up without Fee, Jessica Shepard playing some more minutes. Alana Smith is really doing a good job as an undersized center. And I think Cheryl Reeve had said the other day, like this was a player who, when she was in Chicago, Fee had said, I really don't like playing against her, which is an incredible compliment. And so to bring her in and have her play those quality minutes is important. I don't think it's, a long-term solution to go without Fee because she is an MVP contender and in the lead for that and just the crux of everything that they do. But they can certainly find ways to win without her.
And I think that's what gives me even more confidence about this Lynx team being a legitimate championship contender, as if I needed any more confidence. I mean, they're the best team in the league. But being able to do it, and now on a 5-game winning streak, being able to take down another legitimate contender without your superstar, I think just proves the depth of this team and the way that they're able to to bounce back even without Napheesa Collier and doing it so quickly. Finding ways to win games by any means necessary, I think is the true kind of marquee of a championship contending team. I do want to get to the Liberty side of it all, but you brought it up. DiJonai Carrington, the Lynx made a move before the trade deadline, traded for DiJonai Carrington. In your opinion, what you saw from her, what has she added to this lineup? Because in that game against the Liberty, she comes off the bench with 15 points. And then you supplement that with Kayla McBride, who had 18, Courtney Williams with 14 in that game. I mean, any three of them have the ability to go for the high teens, 20-plus point games. And having that in Napheesa Collier's absence is what you need to kind of keep you going. Obviously, you can't have that for the entirety of the rest of the season or into the postseason. Like, obviously, they're going to need to get Napheesa Collier back at some point, but I think the addition of DiJonai Carrington just gives this already stacked team yet another weapon.
DiJonai Carrington, when we first talked about her last week, we said defense, defense, defense. And I think that is still very true. Courtney Williams, and I think Kayla McBride talked about it too, the freaking luxury of now being able to say, hey, Dejanay, you're going to guard their best player is incredible because it also takes offensive pressure off of, for example, Kayla McBride. She can focus a little more on offense rather than taking all of her energy to defend, the Liberty's best player. And the thing that I always keep in mind was that final play by Sabrina in game 3 that won it in Minnesota on the last play, hits that 3-pointer, quiets the crowd. Kayla McBride was the one guarding her. And Kayla did a good job. This is not like Kayla didn't do a good job. She even said after the game, like, I guarded her a full 40 minutes. But guarding a player like Sabrina a full 40 minutes is exhausting. And so now you have an additional player and a very, very good player who can do that. And as you said, come off the bench and do that. I think the offense is also a luxury that's maybe wasn't like the focal point, right? It's this added benefit. And when they get feedback, it's going to be an even more added benefit.
Oh my gosh, when they get feedback, it's like, how in the world are you supposed to, 1, stop this team, and 2, score on this team? And that kind of brings us, brought up the defensive addition. It kind of brings us to the Liberty from what we've seen. I mean, in that matchup, Sabrina Ionescu's held to 4 for 15 from the field. Natasha Cloud, 6 for 11. Emma Meeseman, 5 for 11. I mean, this team, this Liberty team, whose calling card is dropping threes and very high-scoring games and just kind of like a very high-flying offense, a Golden State Warriors type of offense, the Lynx were able to do what I think is incredibly difficult, and that's take Superman's cape away from them. That's exactly what they did to the Liberty. But what really stood out to you about this team and maybe what needs to change in order for the Liberty to kind of get their lick back against this Lynx team?
I think the Liberty did themselves in a little bit. 20 turnovers is one of their season highs. They just looked sloppy. The entry passes at times seemed incredibly difficult. I think Sandy Brondello said afterward, there just weren't people open, and they kept trying to force that kind of right as soon as they got across half court. The turnovers need to be cleaned up, and I think they will. But they also talked about effort and like a grit. And I think if you look at, we're going to see obviously 2 more of these matchups, but if you look at the first 2 matchups, the Liberty come in, they are severely injured. They still don't have front court depth, even though they do have Emma. But they come into that game and they actually play pretty well for the situation that they're in. And they're proud of that, right? But then the Lynx are, I don't know, still motivated or what have you. And they come into this one. It's their first time in New York since they lose the finals that they feel like they should have won. And as you said, like, get their lick back. Dominant win. New York can't really get anything going. I'm excited now to see what's going to happen in game 3 and game 4, because I don't think New York's going to play like that again, even if they are still without Stewie, Kennedy Burke, and Nyara Sabally.
I just think, if you are a Liberty fan, you are now sitting in a really uncomfortable position of, we just came off a game where we looked tired, sloppy, we're injured. And then you look down at this schedule. You have a West Coast road trip at LA, next day at Vegas, and then you have a game at Minnesota, and then back at home against Minnesota as well. Whereas Minnesota, and when the Liberty have that West Coast road trip, Minnesota's off. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of adding salt into the wound that we are exhausted. We're at the point in the season now where it has been an absolute grind. Everybody's hurt. Everybody's exhausted. We've been traveling, with this kooky schedule, and it doesn't get any easier anytime soon. So I don't know where the Liberty are supposed to find any sort of reprieve once they have that next back-to-back against the Lynx.
I think I just heard my dog deliver an incredibly deep sigh just listening to this again.
Because he knows how exhausting it is to have a WNBA schedule in 2025.
He understands. He's like, you need naps. You need rest.
He knows.
But I think it's super interesting or intriguing. We were just talking kind of about stories coming up and what we're focused on. By the time these 4 games are done, there's a real possibility that we look at them and say, what can we really take out of this should these two teams meet again in the playoffs. Because even though players are going to say it's not an excuse, that we didn't have Fee. It's not an excuse that we didn't have Stewie. It's not an excuse our schedule. Everyone goes through the same schedules, whatever. It's still fair to say it impacts you. Like, there is an impact. And Leo Fevich actually told the New York Post in an exclusive that they had last week that this is probably the toughest, most tired she's ever been. And now she played in Eurobasket, plays overseas, in the WNBA offseason. Like, these players go year round. Kayla McBride can say the same thing. But it is exhausting at this point, and I do wonder what will come into play should these two meet in the playoffs that we've already seen in these matchups.
And that's true. It's not an excuse. Every player and every coach in any sport in America will tell you that your schedule is not an excuse. But sometimes it can be an explanation for how a certain team looks. If they look, totally jet lagged and sluggish and are hurt and worn down, like, that makes sense, because there's not a sport in the world in which scheduling is created equal. You're always going to get, someone's going to have the short end of the stick. There's going to be one team or several teams that travel cross country more than any other team. And when you're an East Coast team like New York, your West Coast travel is inevitably going to be more difficult than maybe some of these Midwestern, Chicago, Indiana kind of teams. So no, it's not an excuse, but it does explain maybe some late season, mid-season skids that we could be seeing from some of these teams. And I think the Liberty are an example of that. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. The Liberty, like we said, an absolute grind of a schedule over the next couple of weeks, but we will get a rematch with Minnesota and New York on August 16th. So that's this upcoming Saturday. We'll give you a full kind of a breakdown of all those games that you're going to want to watch over the next couple of weeks, but that's one that I for sure will be keeping an eye on. Before we head into the rest of our game, first it's halftime. All right, before the third quarter, let's take a breather. Let's go into halftime. The Golden State Valkyries are hatching an egg, Cass. This article, the headline is Mysterious Oversized Violet Speckled Egg, which is a sentence I don't think I've ever said in my life. It's not every day that you get to say something that you've never said. Love that. Thank you for that, Golden State Valkyries. It appeared in front of Thrive City in San Francisco, and it is believed to be from a, quote, undetermined bird species. A lot of mystery happening at Valhalla. Cass, what's going on? What's going on with the Valkyries?
Continuation of their great marketing. We're expecting a mascot to come. I don't know much else. My favorite part about this, we just looked into this. So when they did this, they said that they had a wildlife expert out to look at the bird. I believe his name is Kenny Elkin. And so I'm kind of thinking, like, is this guy real, or is it just like, I don't know, you made up some name, right? He's real. He's a freelance falconer. And they have involved him in coming out to look at the egg and see what's going on. Like, they are going so deep into this. I love the commitment. I think if you grow up a Valkyries fan, or you are a part of this, you're going to have kids one day, whatever, nieces, nephews, you're telling them about this weird little piece of lore about how you got a mascot, if it is a mascot.
And if you are in the Bay Area, how fun would that be to go take the kids over to see the big purple egg in front of the arena? First of all, I did not know that falconers could freelance.
I guess so.
I just didn't know that there were freelance gigs available out there, but you learn something new every single day. I give so much credit to this Valkyries marketing team for playing so much into the colors and the camaraderie and the themes, and playing into what they've built, the brand that they have built for that team. Good for them for going all in on the theme. I think that the rest of these expansion teams in the WNBA can probably take a page out of their playbook. Obviously we were waiting on Portland colors and mascot names for a very long time, but I think now they're really starting to play into it, to play into some of the themes and the roses of the city of Portland. I love this. Like, I'm all for the shtick. I am all for the anticipation, and it is gonna be like a really cool winged creature, right? Like, that's the mascot.
I would think so.
I
right?
would think so,
Like
but I'm here for the anticipation. I will act surprised.
I hope it's like the birthday cakes, and like there's someone in the egg in a mascot uniform just like popping out.
Or what if it's like an animatronic thing?
I don't know if I like that.
Okay, fair. Too far.
No.
Way too far. Yeah,
We're writing in notebooks, Caroline, and you want an animatronic? Like, is this like old school Chuck E. Cheese?
This is like old school, no school. Well, yeah, of course. Like the animatronic guys that would play
like in Toy Story?
Yes. Yeah, why not? I like it. I'm thinking like the Jurassic Park ride at Universal Studios, like the pterodactyl that comes out and you hear the dinosaur noises. Like, that's what I'm picturing.
We want people to come back to games.
But like a cute one, like a cute purple little pterodactyl looking guy with a cute little screech, not a scary one. Hire us, Valkyries. We'll see. I'm not a marketing expert, but we'll see. Okay, let's get into the third quarter. We mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show in our Fast Five, but Sydney Colson and Aari McDonald are out for the season. Sydney Colson tore her left ACL. Aari McDonald broke a bone in her right foot, and both Fever point guards will be out for the remainder of their season. Now, the Fever have won 6 of their last 8 games. They have been red freaking hot, Cass. But no Sydney Colson, no Aari McDonald for right now, for the foreseeable future. No Caitlin Clark, and we don't have an update of when we might see Caitlin Clark. How sustainable is this winning when the Fever don't have a single healthy point guard?
Yeah, they played the Chicago game without a point guard, and certainly they have players who can handle the ball. Kelsey Mitchell. Stephanie White actually pointed out Aaliyah Boston as someone who could initiate their offense. They did sign Odyssey Sims the day after on a hardship end of season, I think, contract. This is just brutal for Indiana. Like, I don't know of a team in recent memory that has had such realistic championship hopes just continuously like knocked down. And this is a team too that, like, what was it, a month ago won the Commissioner's Cup championship, and we were saying like, oh wow, this is still a championship contender. Like, get Caitlin back. What kind of team are they going to be? A week ago, like, same thing. We were talking about how much Aari McDonald has meant to this team, being able to step in and just flawlessly run the offense. And like, I've talked to Sydney Colson, way back eve of the season, just about the importance of veteran leadership and what that means to a locker room, and what it means to have her doing that, which has clearly mattered. Indiana feels like just cannot catch a break in luck. I hope whatever is going on with Caitlin Clark, they do not rush her back. I don't think they will. But I do wonder, last time she came back, she was on a little bit of a minutes restriction. And so what does that look like if you really don't have a point guard who's been with you all season? Odyssey Sims is a consummate professional, a veteran in this league, has played with a lot of different teams. I trust her, but she hasn't been with this team until, there's 4 weeks left in the season.
And you don't just insert new player, new point guard here and expect it to be a seamless transition. Obviously that's the idea, but that's not realistic. And some might think bringing Caitlin Clark back now makes more sense now that you are, without a point guard, a healthy point guard. But I would say, Cass, like, now even feels like there's less of a push, maybe even less pressure to bring back Caitlin Clark, because without Aari and without Sydney Colson, will adding in a Caitlin Clark all of a sudden make a massive difference? Like, is the risk of bringing Caitlin Clark back from injury, even on a minutes restriction, worth the reward that you may or may not get? And frankly, I say no. When it comes to Caitlin Clark, I think it is wise of the Indiana Fever to err on the side of caution, to err on the side of we'll look ahead to the future and mortgage the right now if we feel like we'll be better in 2026 and beyond because of it.
Because at this point, you're sitting in a really tough pack of teams just literally battling it out every single night for positioning. And maybe you feel like, okay, if Caitlin's ready to go in a couple weeks and we can ramp her up, we like this first round matchup that it looks like we're getting. But also, like, if you're playing a team that's really physical or is going to throw, that blitzing and hedging at Caitlin and make life difficult, and you don't have, another point guard who's been in your system, another Aari McDonald, has been so important to them. Like you said, do you want to risk it? Do you feel like you can win a championship this year? Because I think if you're being realistic, given the situation you're in with injuries, specifically that situation, maybe you feel like this is just the Lynx or the Liberties year. I mean, anyone can get hot. I don't want to take that away. But to your point, there is so much risk, it feels like, in doing this with a player who is the face of the franchise and can bring you multiple championships. Like Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston will still be signed next year, even under the new CBA, because they are on rookie contracts. You're going to have a bunch of money to spend on almost whatever player you can bring in, because most of them are free agents. I don't know. I think also it's hard for us to say, because we don't know exactly what's going on with Caitlin Clark. They've been very cagey about all of that. They canceled some shoot-arounds last week. We're not sure how healthy Caitlin is, how close she is. Only the front office knows that. It will be interesting to see how they handle it.
And I think for right now, at this point, it is so day-to-day, or at least that's what the vibe is from the front office. And if the front office has decided, hey, we're shutting Caitlin down for the season, I do feel like an announcement would have been made. And maybe this is a business decision on behalf of the Indiana Fever.
I don't think so.
It's all posturing at this point. Like, at this point, it's all just guessing on our part.
I don't think they would have announced if Caitlin were out for the rest of the season, unless it were an injury that we saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, like, why announce that your star is going to be out for the rest of the season and basically announce to everybody, like, hey, if you came to see Caitlin, don't worry about coming because she's gone. Well, it is a very fair point.
But also tip off to other teams that your star player is not coming back. I don't know. I think we've seen W teams get into this game of the mind game almost. We see it with injury reports, which seems to be tightened up a little bit lately. I think it's just a game. I don't know if she'll come back or not, but I don't think they would say.
Honestly, yeah, you've completely changed my mind. Why in the world would they announce it?
Yes.
Yeah, great job, Cass. We're very persuasive. And that's another thing. Like, right now, that's probably the ultimate tool that the Fever have in their back pocket, is forcing opposing teams to have to do some sort of game planning for Caitlin Clark, because it is so ambiguous about what her status is, that if you have that leverage, you will hold on to that leverage as long as you possibly can. So, yeah 1,000%. We will be watching the Fever moving forward of how they're able to overcome even more injuries, because they've done a really masterful job of overcoming Caitlin Clark's injury, but something's got to give at some point. And the more and more the injuries keep piling on, the more and more difficult it gets to contend in this kind of mucky middle of the WNBA where everybody is jockeying for positioning. But let's move on to the fourth quarter, because as we're talking about positioning, don't look now, fourth quarter, LA Sparks. Should we be keeping an eye on the Sparks? They've won 4 of their last 5. They've won 9 of their last 11. Cameron Brink comes back from an ACL tear that she suffered last season. We have Kelsey Plum averaging 20 points a game. We have Dearica Hamby averaging 18 points a game. The LA Sparks have been on freaking fire. Cass, should we be paying more attention to them?
Yes, because I think they can come up and steal a playoff spot a month after we thought they were dead in the water, for lack of a better term there. They're also one of the most exciting offenses. So let me bring my notebook back out.
Get it, girl.
28 WNBA games this year have been over 100 points. So a team has scored over 100 points. 5 by Los Angeles, which ties Minnesota for the most. But Los Angeles has done them all since July 24th. They had back-to-backs, and then they lost a game, and then they had 3 in a row of 100. I think everyone is stepping up in different ways. Kelsey Plum doesn't have to facilitate the offense as much. She had talked about that this past game, I think, and also talked about like she thinks she's better when she attempts fewer shots. Cameron Brink coming back, like the rim protection, that's really, I think, what's going to make the difference for LA if they are to get into the playoffs is defense, because that has been a struggle. And I think having Cameron Brink back as she ramps up to minutes is going to be so important. She is an elite rim protector. I think her first game back, it was like 5 blocks in 10 minutes or something. Like her efficiency and the minutes that she's playing is absolutely bonkers. And so when you look at some of these teams without star players, well, Los Angeles now has one of their star players back.
And even when in the first couple of games back from injury, Cameron Brink was on a little bit of a pitch count. Look, rightfully so. You don't want to rush her in after she's been off the court for the last year. But she made her presence known, even in just the 15 give or take minutes that she played in her first 2 games back. Like, it was highlight reel type of plays. So why not pay attention to the Los Angeles Sparks at this time? Because looking at the standings, of course, you have the Lynx at the top, you have the Liberty and the Dream and the Mercury at the top, and they've kind of shifted between 2 and 4. But you have the Sparks right up there with the Golden State Valkyries, the Seattle Storm. They're ascending, taking themselves out of the depths of the standings, and now they're putting themselves in position to be one of those postseason teams. So if they keep up this trajectory and this momentum, there's no reason to believe why the Sparks won't be in the conversation. And as we're talking about postseason and West Coast teams, we'll go into a little bit of an overtime, give you a little extra something, a little lanyap topic for you. We still have plenty of basketball left to be played before we enter the postseason. But the Golden State Valkyries are a team that I just named that are in contention for that conversation. They're sitting right at 500, 15-15, just below Seattle and just above LA. Now, if the Valkyries did make the postseason, they would be the first expansion team ever to make the postseason in their debut year. Again, we have time. There's a lot of basketball left to be played. But your impression on the Valkyries at this point, is what they're doing sustainable until the end of the season?
I want to talk about schedule. What I will say about Golden State, though, is them staying able to win without Kayla Thornton and with everyone they've had in and out of the lineup, just so impressive. Such a good job in Golden State. I think they are going to make the playoffs. But one thing to pay attention to for both Golden State and Los Angeles is their schedule down the stretch. They're kind of in that pack of the middle of easy schedules. Golden State has a little bit of a tougher schedule because they're going to have to play Minnesota twice, New York once, Atlanta once. When you look at Los Angeles, the interesting thing about them is they've already completed their Minnesota series. The one series they haven't completed, like the big one, is Dallas. And especially if Paige Beckers is not available for Dallas, that's looking pretty good for LA. So like Golden State, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, maybe even like Indiana in there. It's going to be nightly. Nightly, these standings are going to change.
And they already have. I mean, it's been good. That 2 through 5, 2 through 6 kind of area, and the standings have shifted so much. Expand that field even more for the Sparks, the way that they're playing, and the Valkyries and how consistent they have been. I think that's a very important point you bring up, though, when we talk about, in any sport, championship contenders or, a team that you can trust. The schedule is so pivotal in that, especially because we just highlighted the gruesome schedule, truly, that the Liberty have over the next couple of weeks. Well, if I have to put, stake into a team, I'm going to be looking at a team that's getting hot at the right time and that has a much more manageable upcoming schedule versus a team that's getting injured and is sliding and has an even more difficult schedule upcoming. So a very smart point by you that we have to look at some of these schedules and what's facing some of these teams when the margins of difference are like razor thin. All right, we've got a ton of those matchups coming up this week. We've got a blast of a week in the WNBA. Rivalry week is coming up on Tuesday. We have New York and LA. New York at LA is at 10 o'clock Eastern time. Yawn. Late. I'll be watching it, but still.
Welcome back to the East Coast, Caroline.
Yeah, Eastern time zone is kicking my butt, Cass. I just moved from the Central time zone in Nashville to Charlotte in the Eastern time zone. Like, yeah, I guess it's great that things start later in the morning, but like, your girl needs her beauty sleep. Okay, so maybe 7 o'clock, a nice, healthy 7 o'clock start would be much, much appreciated. I know that everybody, is on my schedule. On Wednesday, the 13th, we've got the Liberty at Las Vegas. That's that West Coast road trip that we were just talking about. 9:30 Eastern time start. And then, of course, we've got Seattle at Atlanta, the WNBA's first regular season game in Canada. That game will be in Vancouver. So nice little setting of the stage, little building of a foundation for the Toronto Tempo that are joining the league. How's your thoughts? WNBA in Canada, eh?
I'm excited for Toronto. WNBA has always, or at least lately, done really well in Canada. Those preseason games packed. People get excited for it. I think it's just a continuation of the expanding of the league, not necessarily in terms of teams, but in terms of fandom and bringing these players to different places. Also, the Toronto Tempo have talked about kind of traveling around their country and playing in different areas, not just their, 22 games or whatever in Toronto. So this is a way to start that. Also, a lot of Canadian players in the W.
Build that Canadian fan base. Look, I'm here for it. We've seen so many other leagues do it. The NFL playing games in Rio and Sao Paulo and Mexico City and Germany and London. They're going global. The NBA is doing the same thing. There's no reason why the W shouldn't be doing that too and continuing to build, the local United States fan base across the world. Why not? Especially when you've got Toronto joining the league in here in just a few short months. Cass, it's been a blast. Always a blast. We are here every single week, keeping you up to date with the latest in the WNBA standings, the latest in terms of movement in the WNBA injuries. Unfortunately, the injury bug has been biting this league, so we'll keep you up to date every single week. So keep it right here with Yahoo Sports.